This was the most welcome sight to early sailors, land. Ships would seldom dare sail out of sight of land. But during the 1400s, better ships and changing conditions in Europe sent sailors to sea in a bold, venturesome spirit. Land over the distant horizon became the object of search, the goal. One of the first Atlantic discoveries, the Madeira Islands. Settlers on Madeira found on its shores, particularly after storms, objects unfamiliar to that part of the world, such as bamboo, plants, and wood carvings, clues that land lay to the west. This was an exciting thought for the restless and jealous towns near the Atlantic. While trade centers were growing throughout Europe, it was the Mediterranean ports that captured the high profits, especially the Italian cities of Venice and Genoa. With their large fleets and central geographic position, they monopolized the lucrative trade routes between eastern ports and the eager markets of Europe. Merchants and captains to the west, in ports such as Lisbon, were anxious to break this monopoly. While Portugal was successfully searching around Africa, the docks were buzzing with new ideas.
Is there land to the west?
Might it be true that the world is round?
Can Asia really be reached by sailing in the opposite direction?
The 1400s were busy, thoughtful times in Europe. Men and women were faced with new opportunities to better themselves. The increasing demand for skills and products brought money. Books could now be in the hands of all who were eager to learn. During this period of awakening, known as the Renaissance, lived Christopher Columbus. He read books by such men as Marco Polo, Aristotle, and Ptolemy, a Greek geographer whose map showed the world with a curved surface, with water separating Europe and Asia. Like many during the Renaissance, Columbus grew up with a strong curiosity about the world. As a boy in Genoa, he had been fascinated by the yarns and the sights of the busy harbor. As a young man, he had gone to sea on trading voyages representing an Italian banking house. But the prosperity of Genoa and its rival seaport Venice was threatened by the cutting off of trading routes to the east by warring Turks, and also by the increasing interest in trade and exploration in the countries facing the Atlantic. So Columbus, eager for opportunity and adventure, moved west to Lisbon, the capital of Portugal. His move to an exploring nation facing a challenging ocean, his continued interest in books and maps, and the clues he saw washed ashore during a visit to Madeira, all helped to inspire his great dream, the dream of sailing west to Asia. As he sought support, some people were intrigued by his well-considered reasoning. Others turned their backs in disbelief, mocking and ridiculing him. But it was a royal court that Columbus had to convince. Only from a monarch could he get the authority and money for the expedition. 3 kings rejected him. His only hope was Spain, so he moved there. For 6 years, Columbus pleaded before Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, and waited with fading hopes. Spain's main interest was to defeat and drive the Moors out of Spain, to unite the country. Finally, a great national victory. After 700 years of foreign occupation, here the Spanish monarchs ride out to demand the surrender of the Moors. The year 1492. Isabella is now free to look outward towards the Atlantic.
A discovery of a new route to the east might help us match the prosperity of Portugal. Why not give this ambitious dreamer a chance?
Columbus had his answer. His fleet was made up of 3 ships, none much bigger than a modern tugboat. Soon underway with only 88 men were the Nina, the Pinta, and the captain's ship, the Santa Maria. But before long, the many stories of the unknown ocean began to work on the imaginations of the crew. Fear of the strange creatures, the devastating storms, the endless drifting into darkness, perhaps never to return. All made for a frightened, mutinous crew. Yet Columbus pressed westward. Then,
Land ho!
silhouetted against the sky, there it was at last. Hours later, this was the scene that ended the weeks of searching and centuries of thought. With banners waving, leading his once doubtful crew, Columbus claimed for Spain the island he named San Salvador and promised God to spread the Christian word among the natives. This is the route the little fleet had taken from Spain, stopping briefly at the Canary Islands, then the brave voyage west. San Salvador was only a small primitive island, so the search continued for the gold and the cities mentioned by Marco Polo. In Cuba, natives wearing only small gold ornaments told of richer lands to the southeast. The fleet sailed on to explore Haiti before heading homeward, taking advantage of favorable winds and currents. Columbus and his crew, believing they had discovered a western route to Asia, were welcomed back to Spain as heroes after their 7-month adventure. But there was some disappointment that all Columbus could present to their majesties were a few natives that he misnamed Indians, some birds, colorful feathers, and gold trinkets. At least there was no mistake that land had been reached. As Columbus knelt to receive the blessing for a second voyage, 1,500 eager adventurers were about to leave with him. His discovery unleashed great excitement in Europe, and especially in Spain, where the recent triumph against the Moors left people free from war, restless, and in a mood to conquer new fields. While Columbus sought in vain for the cities of Asia on this and 2 other voyages, opportunists followed upon his discoveries with an unrestrained lust for fortune. Columbus, not long after, died, poor and unnoticed, his achievement forgotten in the rush. The first to see Columbus's discovery in its proper light was Amerigo Vespucci.
So far, men have sailed along these shores for upwards of 600 miles. Seeing that the end is nowhere in sight, I am firmly convinced that what we have here is no mere island, but an entire continent.
In this small book, a geographer, hearing of Amerigo Vespucci's opinion, honored him by calling the new land America. Spanish adventurers marched into new lands almost on the heels of the explorers. One motive was to Christianize the natives, but far more compelling was the drive for material gain. As Spaniards extended rule, they sought for themselves rewards of land and riches. Courageous, but cruel and greedy, neither jungle nor native could hold them back. Few in numbers, but with horses and guns, something never seen before in this part of the world, they soon earned the title conquistadors, Spanish for conquerors, and they had a strong appetite for El Dorado, gold. One of them, Balboa, searched for it throughout Panama. This took him through swamps, thick jungles, and over high hills. One day in 1513, reaching the top of a mountain, Balboa looked west, the first explorer to sight the Pacific Ocean. By its shore, Balboa nonchalantly proclaimed Spanish rights to all lands bordering this unknown water. A most daring conquistador, Hernando Cortez, was, like many of the others, a soldier no longer fighting in Europe, but in Cuba, searching for victories in the New World. In the year 1519, with an army of 600, Cortez reached the mainland, burnt his ships to prevent desertion, and marched his troops overland. His goal, the city at the heart of a nation of Aztec Indians. The most beautiful city in all the world, wrote Cortez. The Aztec religion called for human sacrifice, but the people Cortez met were skilled in matters of government and war. Spain's march of conquest took a tragic toll of death and destruction. In an area larger than Spain itself, ruthless slaughter destroyed one civilization to impose another. From colonies which soon extended over Panama, the rest of Central America, and the Caribbean, the search for El Dorado sent explorers both north and south. Coronado traveled from Mexico as far as the state of Kansas in his unsuccessful search for more cities of wealth. Ponce de Leon explored the coasts of Florida driven by an added goal, the supposed magic fountain of youth. He quenched his thirst, perhaps, but de Leon never got younger. De Soto organized one of the biggest expeditions. With several hundred, he landed in Florida and traveled and fought for 2 years through the south. he reached the Mississippi, only to collapse with a fever and die. In the river he discovered, he was buried secretly one night to conceal his death from vengeful Indians. Conquistadors also headed south. Francisco Pizarro, the most uneducated and violent of the conquerors, with a handful of soldiers, found the hidden civilization of the Incas in 1532 in what is now Peru. These people were amazingly advanced in farming, medicine, and the arts. But here too, conquest meant destruction. The Spaniards plundered and killed thousands, among them the Indian leader who, to be spared his life, gave a room full of gold worth millions. He was murdered anyway. While thousands of fortune seekers gathered their possessions and headed for New Spain, explorers were more interested in their original goal, the western sea route to Asian treasures. But every try ran headlong into an annoying obstacle: land. By 1519, this much coast was known. Where then was Asia? The idea of sailing south around this barrier occurred to Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese soldier who had seen the Spice Islands from the other direction. Since then, he had learned the skills of navigation, and now, after persuading Spain to support him, he was under sail to prove his idea. A bitter winter spent on South American soil, which in turn triggered a serious mutiny, and a disastrous shipwreck, where only the first hardships met. Underway again, the fleet encountered vicious storms, dodging cliffs and hidden rocks as they fought their way for a month through the straits that now bear Magellan's name. So hazardous were the straits that the fleet was frequently guided by rowboat. At last, before them, the Pacific. Guns were fired in joy. But all their troubles were not behind. The Pacific, twice the width of the Atlantic, seemed endless. Passing months brought scurvy, hunger, thirst, and death. The journey was like a nightmare. And even when land was reached after 4 long months, another cruel blow. Magellan and many of his men met violent death at the hands of natives. His plan might have ended there had not one ship, in what had been a fleet of 5, staggered back to Spain. The torturous journey was greeted with cheers, but only 18 men heard them, all that remained of 240 who had set out 3 years earlier. This great but tragic voyage had sailed around the world, proving it was indeed round. By now, the land that had once been a mere barrier was known to be a new world, one which Spain was to dominate for 2 centuries. As she went about transplanting a Spanish culture that has left its mark to this day, Spain's conquest turned her almost overnight into a world power, so strong that the Atlantic became almost her private highway to the New World. Would other nations, prodded by the envy of returning boatloads of wealth, would they dare challenge Spain's domination of the New World and the ocean leading to it?